Greetings, everyone. A very warm welcome on behalf of UN Global Compact in partnership with Sightsavers to this webinar titled Advancing Corporate Sustainability Through Disability Inclusion. I am now going to hand over to Razak and Kelvin to officially start the webinar. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who joined this webinar. As initially said, this is a webinar organized by the UN Global Compact Nigerian Network in partnership with Sightsavers. The theme of this webinar is Advancing Corporate Sustainability Through Disability Inclusion. My name is Razak Adekoya and I work with Sightsavers. I'm going to be moderating this session together with Kelvin. Kelvin, can you introduce yourself? And probably maybe Kelvin have network challenge. Kelvin is the staff of the UN Global Compact Nigerian Network. Throughout the session today, you'll be listening to speakers from different companies sharing best practices of how you could mainstream disability inclusion into the sustainability agenda of your corporate organization. Bet you this is one of the best sessions you would ever attend this month, as this is more practicable and you'll be hearing during the session examples and practicable live work that you can use there. At this moment, I'm going to pass it on for the opening remarks and the close. We have the opening remarks from Naomi, who is the Executive Director of the UNGC Nigerian Network, and she'll be giving the opening remarks for today's session. Naomi, if you are there, back to you for the opening remarks.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. It's an honor to welcome you all to this very important gathering focused on advancing corporate sustainability through disability and inclusion. Let me use the opportunity to also acknowledge the member of the board of the UN Global Compact that is the panelist in today's event, Ms. Omobolanle Victorania. So we reference to the work that we do at the United Nations Global Compact. I cannot stress enough the importance of this topic for the sustainability agenda. The UN Global Compact is the largest corporate sustainability initiative in the world, with over 20,000 participants in 160 countries. Our mission is to mobilize the global movement of responsible businesses and organizations that are committed to aligning the strategies and operations with universal principles on human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. Disability inclusion is an essential component of the mission. People with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world, comprising over 1 billion or 15% of the global population. Despite this, they continue to face significant barriers to their full participation in society, including access to education, employment, and other opportunities. As business leaders and corporate citizens, we have a responsibility to ensure that our organizations are inclusive and accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities. Disability inclusion is not just a moral imperative, it is also a business imperative. And studies have shown that companies that embrace diversity and inclusion, including disability inclusion, are more innovative, productive, and profitable than those that do not. Moreover, disability inclusion is an integral part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are a universal call to action to end poverty. Disability inclusion is explicitly mentioned in several SDGs, including Goal 8 on decent work and economic growth, Goal 10 on reduced inequalities, and Goal 11 on sustainable cities and communities. The United Nations Global Compact is committed to working with businesses and organizations around the world to advance disability inclusion and achieve the SDGs. We believe that disability inclusion is not a standalone issue, but rather an integral part of a broader sustainability agenda that encompasses social, environmental, and economic dimensions. Today's gathering is an excellent opportunity for us to learn from each other, share best practices, and identify corporate actions to advance disability inclusion in our organizations and beyond. I encourage you to approach today's discussions with an open mind and a willingness to learn. Let us listen to each other's perspectives, ask questions, and challenge our assumptions. Let us work together to create a more inclusive and sustainable world. In conclusion, I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Your presence is a testament to your commitment to corporate sustainability and disability inclusion. Let us continue to work together to build a more inclusive and sustainable world for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening remarks. I'm going to pass it on for the first keynote. I'm coming from Simon Brown, the Deputy Technical Director for Economic Empowerment at Sightsavers. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Razak, and thanks, Naomi, and of course, thanks to everybody who's dialed in today. Yep, as Razak said, my name is Simon Brown. I'm the Deputy Technical Director of Economic Empowerment at Sightsavers, based in the UK. And I'm going to start with just a short, it's called a keynote speech, but maybe it's going to help to have a few slides looking at some of the things that Naomi has already mentioned, and as a lead into then the real kind of roundtable from a number of really interesting companies. And so as we look at it, and as Naomi said, people with disabilities are half as likely to be active in the labour force as people without disabilities. And even when they are active in the labour force, they are twice as likely to be unemployed. And we see that a little bit from the graph on the screen, which is from ILO data, the International Labour Organization data. And we see at that right-hand side, this particularly looks at employment relative to populations. And populations are between 15 and 64 years old. And we see that kind of disparity visual there on the screen. Yeah, that people with disabilities are fundamentally underrepresented in employment. Now, that doesn't make sense. Why would a system, a labor system, prefer to keep people with disabilities out of the labor force and perhaps dependent on pensions and subsistence allowances, rather than find ways to encourage people with disabilities into productive labor or into productive employment? And I think this is then a big focus for us, because the consequence of that, if we go to the next slide, please, as I look at World Bank data and more ILO data, then we're able to pretty well estimate that the cost to the global economy is about $6 trillion. And that's a significant portion of the global economy that we're wasting, or the opportunity that we're wasting, by not encouraging people with disabilities to be economically active and facilitating that move to more productive lives. And yet we know that companies and employers really and increasingly do want to be more inclusive in workforces, and have often tried, have somewhat struggled, and are asking for help. And that's the great opportunity we have as Sightsavers, working with the UN Global Compact, to then perhaps provide some of that help. Yeah, we know on the next slide, please, that as I say, companies are recognizing this imperative within the SDGs, but also beyond that into sustainability programs. That companies look at it, of course, from a talent acquisition perspective, and increasingly recognize that there's a big part of the talent potential that has been perhaps not recognized or not embraced for many years. And that that diverse groups of people working in a company tend to be far more innovative in products and service creation and delivery, which of course in the end comes back into reputational benefits, which attracts even more of those really talented people into companies. Yeah, so companies begin to really recognize this as an imperative around diversity and innovation in workforces. But on the next slide, we also begin to see that actually there's a lot of customers out there, consumers, who are also people with disabilities. Yeah, and as Naomi said, 15% of the world's population have a disability. Yeah, sometimes it's even argued even a bit higher than that, but let's stay with that kind of 15%, and how we then begin to break that down into kind of what we call impairment groups. Yeah, that companies are also recognizing that we need to change our products and services to be more accessible to people with disabilities. And of course, that links back to the talent. Yeah, that if we have a talented people and a more diverse workforce, then we're much more likely to be innovating those products and services that are accessible to a large part of our consumer base that perhaps we've not really focused on previously. And within that, there's another important number, which comes from a research in the kind of 2015, 2016, which really looked at the amount of the global consumption that is controlled by people with disabilities, their families, and their friends. And back in 2016, that was estimated at $8 trillion US. Yeah, so a kind of tenth of the global economy in terms of consumer spending is then controlled by people with disabilities, their families, and their friends, and that was actually revised up in 2021 to about $13 trillion US, a huge part of the global economy. And then on the next slide, please. Again, Naomi kind of references that there begins to be research, there begins to be some analysis of what advantage comes from being more inclusive, and here we particularly look at something from Accenture and a disability kind of group of employers, or disability interested group of employers in the US, particularly, called Disability IN, and Accenture looked at their kind of indices from 2015 to 2018. They analyzed 145 companies and identified 40 of those as kind of disability champions, the ones that were really being much more inclusive. And they found some interesting kind of, at least causal, casual relationships, not necessarily causal relationships. The more inclusive companies tend to have much higher revenues. Yeah, there's about a 28% premium on revenues, but also around profit. Yeah, there's a 30% differential on profit, and net income is double. Yeah, so again, whilst I can't say this is a causal relationship, there is an interesting kind of condition there. Yeah, where we're seeing the most inclusive companies tend to be not only innovative, but the most profitable. And when you get to see these, or get these slides, there is a link to this Accenture research, which is quite short and very consumable. And I do encourage you to kind of go and take a look at that link. It's still a little bit old, right? It goes back to between 2015 2018. But on the next slide, we begin to see two, or the first of two, really quite recent bits of analysis. The ILO Global Business and Disability Network produced a report in 2021 from a survey of 10,000 people working in hundreds of companies. And that data that came back, and of course this was post-COVID, that 73% of people working in companies, 73% of companies and 69% of people working in companies are expecting greater diversity and inclusion as companies build back from COVID-19. So quite an interesting and much more recent expectation from people that work in the organizations that we do. And on the next slide, we see a similar result from another platform called the Valuable 500, which is a grouping of 500 very large companies, mainly very large companies, coming together to promote more disability inclusion in workforces and in products and services. And we see here that whilst there's that expectation for greater inclusion and diversity, 49% of the companies who responded to the Valuable 500 survey also were pretty consistent in saying we lack that confidence around disability. Yeah, that we want to be more inclusive, but we're not ready. And I think this is then the the launching point, yeah, where we have seen that in our own programming, yeah, when I went back to that first slide, that companies do want to be more inclusive, have tried, have struggled, and are asking for help. And I think this is then underscoring that and kind of reinforcing the need for more of that collaboration between organizations like Sightsavers and yourselves on building that confidence. And on the last slide, we then see that happening really very well within our own relationships, and some of these companies we're going to hear from in the next session is those companies that I call pioneers, or among the pioneers. These are some of the companies that we have been working with across Africa and South Asia over the last 4 years, whether that be in direct wage employment or looking at kind of connecting people to supply chains, from farmers to entrepreneurs to retailers. Yeah, so that there's a whole massive opportunity that we're now in that what I call a generation of opportunity or a generation of change, and hopefully this roundtable will inspire us to get on with that, perhaps even more purposefully than we have done already. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there and hand back to the moderators to then take us into those presentations from some of those companies. Razak, back to you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for sharing that business and ethical rationale for disability inclusion. I think clearly you've been able to demonstrate the empiric data for mainstreaming disability inclusion. But I think we would like to hear the practicable. What are those actions that companies have been able to put in place? At this moment, I'm going to pass it to the panel moderator in person of Dr. Joy Shuaibu. She's the Director of Program Operations at Sightsavers. She would be moderating the panel session and she will introduce the panelists. Over to you, Dr. Joy.
Thank you very much, Razak. I think that Naomi and Simon have set the stage for our discussion. And there are 3 words that came through for me as Naomi gave her opening remarks. 1 is responsible organizations. 2 is aligning to universal best practices. And the 3rd is learning. And this is what this session is going to be focusing on. And Simon has given us a background as regards to facts and how that it is important for business and corporate organizations to see inclusion and diversity as ethical and not a charitable issue. So we would like to hear from a couple of responsible organizations who have made diversity and inclusion a priority for their organizations on how they are going about doing this. And hopefully others who are here who also are passionate about this journey will learn from them. So without waste of time, I'd like to first introduce our first speaker, Odunayo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of MTN. And so I'll hand over to you, Odunayo, so you can just share with us your experience from MTN. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Joy. And just to correct, I'm not the Chief Executive Officer of MTN. I'm the executive, I head the foundation. So I lead the team at the MTN Foundation. Thank you for having us this afternoon. And I must say that a wonderful keynotes, lessons from Naomi and imperatives, and also the stats that we have seen. Well, I'll speak from the perspective of from MTN and the foundation. For us at MTN, the PWD, that's the Persons with Disabilities Agenda, it continues to remain a critical part of our diversity and inclusion framework and strategy. Because for us, it is diversity and inclusion of different clusters of people within our community. And so I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, we took the first baby steps towards becoming a disability confident company. We partnered with Sightsavers to conduct the first ever disability inclusion audit in the company. And I think for us, it was us, just putting ourselves out there and realizing that, look, if we're going to contribute to the global agenda, to the sustainable development goals of the globe and growth in Nigeria, it was important for us to see where we were, to assess, an assessment of where we currently were at that point and what we needed to do to move forward. And I think, good to say that this step, birthed a lot of inclusive practices and initiatives in areas of people management, facilities management, and of course our corporate responsibility and communications within the company. And I'll just take us through a few. I think the first thing that came out of the audit for us was to relook our physical infrastructure across. We have, we're represented in almost every local government in Nigeria today. So for us, it was important to look at the physical infrastructure for accessibility to people with disabilities. And so for us, I think that's still ongoing and we continue to do that. Things like installation of ramps have become part of, it's part of our facilities management strategy. Any building we're leasing or we are, actually coming up with by ourselves, these are things that must be there. The door level adjustments and marked reserved spaces in the parking lot. I think also very important was the need to accelerate the hiring of people with disabilities, through recruitment. And I think we talked about talent, attraction, diversity and inclusion, brings a lot of ideas. It brings a lot of innovation into the firm. And we can see that with the numbers that have been shared, with us today. And I think for us, a $6 trillion opportunity is something that we must key into and every company should key into. And so we began, focusing on our talent attraction. And I must say that, from 0.9% before the audit, and that was where we were as at the time of the audit. As I speak, we've grown to about 1.6%. And for us, it's a continuous journey. And our target is to achieve 5% employee quota, as stated in the Nigerian Disability Act, and we're really, really working, hard towards this. And we've seen, though baby steps, but we've seen a growth. We're not where we used to be, and we see the value coming into the organization. We see, the value and the perspectives that we are receiving from these PWDs that we have brought on board. Of course, for us, it's also about increasing our employees' disability confidence level, because it's important for us to let our colleagues also understand and accept the fact that we all belong to the same community and the same society as it were. And I think I'll just go straight to what the foundation does. Just to add one more thing, there's also been a deliberate inclusion of PWD suppliers and partners, in our processes. So we're building that ecosystem. And so you see that our processes and policies now reflect the fact that we must have on board PWD suppliers and partners. And I think these are some of the things that we do and we continue to do. We launched the unconscious bias trainings for all our staff. And this is just to create the awareness around disability inclusion within the company, but even acceptance within the larger society. Another thing we do is that we have this staff volunteering platform. And so we are encouraging our staff to volunteer, to serve as facilitators, especially in the areas of IT and, the technical areas, to train people, PWDs, that's people living with disabilities. So for instance, there's one coming up in Lagos and Kano, and our staff have volunteered, and this will enable us meet the objective of SDG 8 as inclusive and creating inclusive and decent jobs. Now, the MTN Foundation, I'd like to share some of what we do. And the first thing I'd like to share is that, I think till date, we're the only company as at date that gives scholarships to blind Nigerians. And I think the scholarships is in the 10th year now. And what we do is that we offer scholarships, annual scholarships. It's a scholarship of excellence. They must have a CGPA of 3.5 to be able to apply for the scholarships. And once you get it and you keep your CGPA, you receive it for 3 years, because you must have entry point is that you must have spent a year in school. And so we find a lot of blind students, blind young Nigerians, very enterprising. We have records of them coming out with a lot of first-class degrees and moving on to other things within the society. And we also run this, we have a program called the Youth Entrepreneurship Development Program, where our scholars have access to funding for their businesses. And I must say that the first recipient to pay off he actually paid off his loan in 6 months, and he was one of our blind scholars, and he's doing really well, and a few other businesses that we've supported. And also in the past, for us, it's important to continue to commemorate the IWD Day, which comes up in December. We continue to work with public sector agencies to mark the day, and not just commemorate the day, but we enable people living with disabilities through the procurement and hand over to them of various equipment that they need to make their navigation in the society very much easier for them. And like I said, it's a journey that we continue in. At MTN, our talent attraction processes, and at the foundation to our initiative, the various processes around our initiatives emphasize and encourage people living with disabilities to be a part of it. And we continue to see the value that this gives us, as a company and as the society at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Odunayo, for sharing your experience from MTN Foundation and MTN. I think to summarize what you have said, disability confidence is a journey. And I'm happy that you've shared statistics of where you started from, 0.9, where you are right now, 1.6, and where you're headed to, 5%. And I think these are just practical ways for organizations who are looking for where to start by at least finding out where you are and where you want to be and how you want to get to your overall target. And I hear, severally the issues around audits, physical auditing of HR practices, and how you're being deliberate going forward to implement findings of these audits. So thank you very much. We look forward to having you get to your 5% mark and also inspiring other responsible organizations towards diversity and inclusion. Moving on, I would like to introduce our next presenter, who is, by the way, a very good friend of mine, someone who is very passionate about diversity. She is the head of sustainability at Access Corporation. And Omobolanle will be sharing with us their experience as well. So it's over to you, Omobolanle.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joy. Thank you for having me, Sightsavers and UNGC. I'm glad to be a part of this conversation, which is very dear to me for many reasons, including the fact that it's long overdue for organizations in this part of the world to ensure inclusion for persons with disability. And there's a critical aspect of corporate sustainability that have not been given the relevant attention it requires over time. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide. That's the topic. First of all, I'll be, speaking primarily from the perspective of Access Corporation, and one, reinforcing the fact that we're committed to sustainability and we're committed to every aspect of sustainability, which includes disability inclusion. We know that advancing corporate sustainability through disability inclusion is the right thing to do, and it makes good big business sense. I've always said that you find that persons with disability are talented, extremely talented. I find them on quite a number of instances, more talented than many of their peers and their colleagues, and therefore we don't need to lose out on this pool of talents. So it's important that we embrace disability inclusion across the three critical dimensions of our operations. One, the workplace; two, the marketplace; and three, communities. And that's the approach within Access Corporation. Next slide. I won't take our time, but just to reinforce that corporate sustainability is really about ensuring that our business strategy is such that considers economic, social, environmental, governance factors in creating long-term value for all stakeholders. Stakeholders include our shareholders, our employees, customers, suppliers, communities, and the earth, the planet in itself. Next slide. And disability inclusion in the workplace has a wide range of benefits, from improved employee engagement and retention to having an increased diversity of thoughts and perspectives, to an expanded talent pool, to enhanced innovation and problem solving. And recently in this part of the world, it would also help organizations to comply with legal and regulatory requirements, given the recent act of non-discrimination against persons with disability, and actually is quite cost-saving. Next slide, please. So what really do we mean by disability inclusion? And I'll just, in a sentence, say it involves promoting equal access to opportunities, services, and resources for individuals with disabilities, allowing them to be able to fully participate in society. And when we speak about disability, we should understand that there are a broad range of disability: physical, sensory, intellectual, and mental disabilities. Next slide. So how can private sector employers tap into the benefits of mainstreaming disability? There are very many ways, more than what I've listed here, but also includes, fostering an inclusive workplace culture, partnering with organizations of persons with disability. You need to understand what they require. You need to work with them to design programs for persons with disability. You cannot, on your own, determine what you should be doing, right, as an organization. You need to partner with organizations of persons with disability, so that, again, your good intentions can then be appropriately realized. Also includes, creating a disability resource group. At the Access Corporation, we created the DEI working group, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we didn't do that until, we did the disability audit, and I'll get to that in a bit. Next slide. So I've moved straight into the Nigerian Business Disability Network, which is a network of businesses in Nigeria that are committed to building disability confidence among employers and enhancing job readiness of individuals with disabilities. This network comprises of 70% private sector organizations, 20% organizations of persons with disability, and 10% development partners and international NGO. The NBDN has adopted the 10 principles of ILO Global Business Disability Networks. And I must say that thanks to Sightsavers, that helped to incubate the Nigerian Business Disability Network. Next slide. So since working with other corporate organizations in Nigerian Business Disability Network, we've learned a lot of lessons. We understand the fact that disability inclusion is very essential from the scratch. So in our policy development, in our strategy, in our program implementation across any and every organization. We also understand that the successful employment of persons with disability has a high reliance on ICT. And so technology is very critical. And so again, supporting community of PWDs in the tech space is with digital skills, with technology is a real have to do kind of thing. Also, we have understood better that we need enabling environments that support the development of inclusive systems. Simon, was talking earlier on about desires of organizations, to embrace disability inclusion. And he was talking about the need to build, that disability confidence. So it's one thing to desire, it's one thing to want to, embrace disability inclusion, but it's another thing to be able to, take the critical steps. And in taking those critical steps, we need to create an enabling environment, to support the development of inclusive systems. We also, on a final note on this slide, realize that advocacy and tools are needed for effective disability inclusion in the workplace. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll just dive from the MBDN into a little case study of Access Corporation. Next slide. So we developed a diversity, equity and inclusion policy in 2012. And, we considered more other aspects of diversity. However, by 2017, moving on the journey, working with organizations of persons with disability, we supported the establishment of the first inclusion hub for persons with disabilities in Nigeria, working with Project Enable. And by 2019, we hosted the first Disability Inclusion and Leadership Awards. Of course, as we moved on the journey, we ensured that, we were engaged on different fronts, scholarships for visually impaired, partnering with schools for the blind, and quite a number of a lot of initiatives, even being embraced, by employee volunteers, because our employees volunteer in communities according to their groups. And so quite a number of them were encouraged, to take up volunteering that impacted positively on persons with disabilities. So centers taking care of autistic children and special needs children were also some of the initiatives that our employees worked on. And by 2020, we got appointed as the chair of the MBDN, and we also joined the UNFFI Gender Equality Sub-Working Group. Now by 2022, we had this disability audit that was conducted by Sightsavers, and it provided a wide range of insights for us. It was in that same year that we worked in partnership with MBDN to organize the Nigerian Diversity and Inclusion Conference. We instituted thereafter, the DEI working group. So I'll just read a couple of things that happened to us from that disability audit. It revealed gaps in our organization, and we realized the need to establish a standalone DEI team. Then we also established the DEI working group, and then we retrieved the accessibility standards from Sightsavers and embedded, that into all constructions of our facilities going forward. So as we construct new facilities, we ensure that those facilities align with the accessibility standards. And we also have Sightsavers working with us to develop a strategy on disability inclusion. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Omobolale, we may need to wrap up quickly. We're behind time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with respect to the strategy and the work approach, it is three-pronged, like I mentioned earlier on: disability inclusion in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the communities. For the workplace, it's really ensuring employers' disability confidence. Like I mentioned earlier, is one thing to desire, is another thing to make it a reality. So through three key areas, all thanks to Sightsavers for this particular work is the work that Sightsavers is doing for us as we speak. So engage, equip, and deliver. Next slide. In the marketplace, so looking at the way we're structured at Access Holding, the banking group is a vertical, and we have other verticals: the pension, insurance, payments, and lending. But again, ensuring that in the marketplace for our customers, that they we are considerate of customers in terms of our financial products and services, in terms of ensuring also that we have a particular focus on women and women with disabilities. So businesses owned and run by persons with disabilities, whether they're youth or they're women. There's a percentage in the strategy now which we're implementing to ensure that we have to meet that minimum requirement. Next slide. And in communities, I've mentioned a bit about this through employee volunteering and through our direct interventions as an organization in communities, through all the verticals, awareness, education, and empowerment, very important, particularly tech empowerment. Also ensuring accessible infrastructure. Thanks to Sightsavers once again for the support and technical assistance through the journey. It's a journey and we're still on it. Also partnering and ensuring that we're there at the table around policies and legislative reforms and providing inclusive services. Next slide. So again, all of this started a long time ago, but the additional insights and the real work started with Sightsavers, started through that audit that has led us to do quite a bit of work, and we're still on the journey. So Sightsavers did the audit and they're working on our disability inclusion strategy development. And we've recently applied the ILO self-assessment tool, not just in Nigeria, not just for the bank, but also for all the other businesses and all the other countries where we operate. And I'll close with the next slide. Disability inclusion is not only a moral and social imperative, it's a strategic business opportunity. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Omobolanle, for this inspiring, very practical presentation that highlights your journey as a corporation and also as the Nigerian Business Disability Network, where Omobolanle is actually chairing and explains why, she's very passionate about this. And one of the things she's highlighted is that there are 3 pathways in the community, in the workplace, and also on individual levels. So thank you very much. We're running behind time, so we would ask Paul. I'll introduce Paul. He's the head of diversity and inclusion at the Unilever West African region. And I'm sure most of the things that he would like to say have been mentioned. So Paul, if you can just quickly run us through some salient aspects as you describe your disability confident journey as an organization. So it's over to you, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Dr. Joy, and thanks everyone. Good day. I am speaking from Ghana. And let me also convey the apologies of my boss, Olahi. He was supposed to take this session, but he got indisposed this morning and asked me to take over. Thank you. Just like Dr. Joy introduced, I lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda for Unilever across the West Africa cluster. And very similar to what Dunayo and Omobolanle had shared around how the journey has been with their companies and the impact it has made so far. But I'm going to do my presentation in less time than I said, given we are running out of time. So for us as a business globally, we set an ambition to say 5% of our workforce should be made up of persons with disability by the year 2025. And we also set as an ambition to be #1 employer of choice for persons living with different forms of disabilities by the year 2025. I mean, I know that this is a very, very audacious target or ambition coming from ground zero where we find ourselves to where we want to get to by year 2025. And we have looked at our journey these 4 pillars, under these 4 pillars: accessibility and accommodation, capability and culture, procedures and policy, and then advocacy and allyship. I'll quickly speak through this. Around accessibility and accommodation, we also work with Sightsavers to conduct a disability audit in our Unilever Nigeria office, and we've also done same in our Ghana office to identify what are the levers, what are the areas of improvement that we could effect to make to make our sites more disability friendly. We got that technical support and guidance from Sightsavers. We implemented a number of them, having disability-friendly washrooms, marking the ground floor of the Nigerian office as a place dedicated for persons with disability, especially those with physical mobility challenges, mainly because our facility in Nigeria does not have an elevator to take people up and down. So the ground floor then became a very convenient one. Around capability and culture, very similar to what Omobolale had shared around how do we drive this culture? How do we make employees get to understand this as a way of life, as part of our ways of working, and then also own and drive the agenda? One of the things that we have always wanted to achieve is how do we move the topic of inclusion from becoming an HR-led ambition or HR-led agenda to making it more business-led, and we are actually getting there. At all company events, we always open it with what we call inclusion moment. So inclusion moment, we get to talk about something around persons with disability, just to get people tuning their mind to the fact that we have some people, it's what the business is putting in place to make sure that we support them and then make the workplace more friendly for all of them. In terms of courses and trainings, we run or we deploy periodic trainings for both the PWDs to help them integrate fully into the workforce, and then for the line managers who will be assigned PWDs to work with, to make sure that they are well equipped to run this journey. On procedures and policy, like I said, we have a very, very strong ownership of this agenda after the board, and this is made up of the EXCO members. They own and drive the agenda. So anything that HR is implementing is actually something that has been sanctioned by what we call the West Africa EDI board. And we also look at some of these things around disability. I will move on advocacy and allyship. We already spoke about, Omobolale had spoken about the Disability Business Network, which we are a part of. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, a shot of some of the things that I had already spoken about, but in more pictorial view. So on the top left is where we provided some reasonable accommodation for our PWDs. Top left, so these are some of our PWD terms that we brought into the organization, having periodic capability sessions with them. In driving this and driving the ownership, on your top right corner, we introduced what we call a referral scheme or a referral policy, just to drive that level of ownership and taking this closer to employees and getting them to own it as well. We developed a referral policy where once an employee for any vacancy, if you refer a female or a person with disability who is able to make it through the process and gets hired, we get to pay the person 1,000 euros. And this is just to encourage people, not to say we are commercializing or monetizing it, but just to drive that culture, just to get employees to understand how much of an importance this subject or this topic is to us. I mean, we can talk about the awards and the awards and recognitions we have received, but time will not permit us to do that. We can move to the next slide. So I will do this in the next minute. So I was looking at this slide talks about what our key priorities are, or maybe let me look at some of the common challenges along the journey. One of it is the current orientation in Nigeria and West Africa, even in Africa, if we want to stretch it a bit more, is such that we do not understand the potency or what these persons with disability are able to deliver. I would share an example. One of the PWD interns I brought into the organization about 2 years ago left, and he has got a number of job opportunities. But when we get to see him, because he's amputated on the left arm, when we get to see him, we now begin to ask questions about his capacity and capability to work. Now, this is someone who was working FMCG, which is fast-paced, pressure-driven, and was able to cope. I mean, there was never a performance issue on him. This is just, I'm calling this out to point to the issues and the mental position of our people in our parts of the world. The high level of investment, if we want to drive some of this reasonable accommodation, it has really cost us money. But again, we are committed to it, and the leadership team always makes funds available to this. There is also the problem of assessing a ready pool of qualified PWDs for employment. We do not know how to get them. We try our best, which is why to bridge this gap, we use our internship scheme. We have a specialized internship scheme where we bring in persons with disability. We have designed a disability-friendly assessment to be able to attract and bring people in. And then how do we now tackle the issue of stigmatization that these PWDs feel when they come to the organization? On key priority, the first one is, so we're having some conversation with some key bodies to say, outside of talent, how do we now support these people? So we already currently run a similar project where we set up women, we deprived women or women who would be in the lower tier of our society into small scale businesses where we provide them products they sell and they turn it around to grow their business. We're also looking at supporting the creation of the disability networks in the other markets within West Africa where we operate. And then finally, to make sure that we continue this journey of PWDs by being able to attract talents into the organization to work with us and for us. So this has been our story, disability journey as Unilever for Nigeria and then for some parts of West Africa. Thank you very much, Dr. Joy.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I want to especially thank all our presenters who have spoken very passionately about the subject. I think they don't leave us with a doubt as regards to their commitment towards diversity and disability inclusion. And unfortunately, because of their passion and commitment, we have overrun on the time allocated for this session, and we will not be able to take the questions that have been and comments that have been posted. But I want to assure everyone who has put in a comment there and question that we will attend to these questions and comments and respond to them appropriately. So I'll be handing now over to Simon for the next item on the agenda. Thank you to all of the speakers and also the attendees.
Perfect. Thank you, Joy, and thank you, everybody. What a wonderful set of presentations. Okay, I'm going to go through very, very quickly some of the really practical, the how bits, which some of the presenters have already referenced. Yeah, that we know a lot of companies are looking for help, and we have a lot of solutions which can help you. We have a very structured kind of approach to what we call equipping, training, auditing, change management, accompaniment, through that journey that perhaps some of you are starting or have already started, but these is something that we can offer to you. On the next slide, we have a lot of intelligence around labor market assessments, which might be relevant. They're freely available. We have for all of the countries where we run our economic development programs. Those analyses are there of how markets function or dysfunction relative to disability, some of the opportunities that are there. On the next slide, we see a lot of resources that are absolutely freely available, downloadable, editable, so you can put your own logos on them. There's a link here on the screen where you can get to those resources, which we call the Employers Disability Confidence Toolkit. As Omar Walanli and Paul said on the next slide, the National Business and Disability Network. We're very proud of this and how we partner with the ILO on establishing these networks in Nigeria, as Paul said, increasingly across West Africa in other parts of Africa and South Asia. And finally, on the next slide, a really important resource to you, and this is the best place to start, the self-assessment. Omar Banlandi talked about this, of how Access Corporation are using this to benchmark where they're at in the different businesses around disability confidence, and that they can come back to periodically to update and see whether there's been any change or what the change has been. This is, again, freely available. The link is there, and is a real great foundation for really starting a disability journey in any organization. And on the final slide, I'll give you my email address. If you want to contact us, do. Yeah, we're very open to be working with you around that disability confidence and that movement that we're so passionate around, ensuring more people with disabilities are represented in workforces, and that's it. Yeah, so thank you very much. And I'm going to hand back to Naomi to close us out. Naomi, back to you.
Thank you, everyone. It's been such an incredible webinar, learning about what our businesses are doing in Nigeria in the disability and inclusion space. Thank you to Unilever, MTN, and Access Bank for sharing such insights on the work you do in championing the rights of persons with disabilities in your companies. We hope that this conversation has been inspiring and will spur other businesses watching to join the space. And we at the Global Compact, we specifically reaching out to you all so that we could be able to share your impact stories on our platforms to encourage others. Thanks also to our colleagues at the UN Global Compact HQ. I can see you all in the participants list. So thank you for joining us, and for the attendees, thank you for joining us, for the very interesting questions that you shared on the Q&A box. The UN Global Compact will continue to mobilize businesses in our network and in Nigeria to set policies, practices, and initiatives that will respect and support the rights and inclusions of persons with disabilities as employees, customers, suppliers, and community members. We will also be working with Sightsavers in that regard, and we invite you to work with us to improve business understanding and support of the rights of persons with disabilities so as to improve their competitiveness and sustainability. Thank you.